Coach, how do you feel about your group so far?
They're coming up. They're coming along. So that's what's fun about fall camp is you have last year's group, and you graduate guys, and even the returners. They just have different roles and different mentality as they grow in their roles. So it's fun just to see guys develop and kind of mature and take the next step. So it's been a great camp to see some of those guys change their role in the team.
We're going to talk to Keane here in a little bit. I know we've asked a lot about him with being gone last year, but how much a difference have you noticed him being back in there makes?
He's awesome. I mean, he's just a guy that does a great job with his command. Again, he's one of those guys that commands respect just by his presence and demeanor. So that's really important at that center position just because everyone's got to listen to him. So as soon as the quarterback gives the calls and then he's making the calls and everyone has to see it and speak the same language. So in order for him to do that, he has to have that kind of command. So that's where he's just invaluable.
For his position, is there a difference, I know there is, between practice and live games? And he hasn't played live football for a long time. So how do you get him ready for live games?
That's a great question, and there's something like there's no preparation for a live game. Like I mean, you can never simulate the feeling coming out of the tunnel. So we do all we can as coaches to make practice feel that way with crowd noise and trying to give them little speeches to get them fired up. But there is that emotion that you can't recreate. So that's what we've been talking with him is just trying to get him controlling what he can control and focusing on those things. That way when he gets into a game situation, it's not too big for him and he'll handle it perfectly.
Do you describe him as an emotional player, or what kind of player is he?
Nope, he's definitely not an emotional player. He's an emotional player, but it's the same emotion. He's not an up and down guy. So he's kind of always at that same level. And again, that's crucial for that position. If a call gets messed up or a protection scheme gets messed up, he doesn't get too hot or too cold. He just kind of stays at the same level.
What does he bring that maybe some of the guys last year didn't bring?
It's just that command. You know what I mean? I love the guys last year. Those guys all were filling in. We were rotating different guys week to week, and they all stepped up when their number was called. But I always joke with the Connie. I was like, hey, you're never going to play guard. And he always gets mad. He's like, well, I can play guard. I was like, you're born to be a center. Like, there's certain people born to be center, and he's one of those guys. So it's great to have him in the rotation.
What does that mean, born to be a center?
Again, it's the little things that go unnoticed. Just the way he commands the huddle, right? You can see it when we come off the sideline, when we're breaking the huddle. Just those little things, the way he communicates with Hank. You know, I mean, he can help get the quarterbacks on a level playing field. So his presence kind of feeds into all the other guys. So that's where he has a lot of value.
What is asked of him pre-snap? You know, maybe in a communication where he used to switch something that maybe a quarterback would do at some point, but you feel so confident in KHG, Hank just lets him handle that? How much of that goes on?
Those guys have to speak the same language, which is hard because the quarterback and center don't see the game through the same lens. Like, you know, I mean, a quarterback, Hank's never played, Talen's never played offensive line. So when we're talking about fronts and blitzes, they know it from seeing it from the film perspective, but they've never been in the face mask seeing the game that way. So that's where those guys have to have a great relationship, and they have to trust each other. When Kakani says, hey, I'm seeing this, honor this call, the quarterbacks have to be like, yep, okay, I might not be seeing it right now the way you're seeing it, but we'll kind of get there. So that's where it's important just that those guys can have really, really efficient communication, because it does no good to solve problems on Sundays. Like, if we have to wait for a meeting to solve a problem, it's too late. So those guys have to be able to fix it in the series, maybe on the sideline, and get it fixed on game day.
So based on what you're saying, how much of an edge is it when a center and a quarterback have played together a season or multiple seasons?
Well, there's it's a good example, right? Tom Brady comes back for the Bucs, and what's he doing? He's calling their center, and that guy was on his way out the door, and he's calling him, and he's begging him to come back. He's like, you need to come back. You need to come back, because those guys, there's just all those little things on, you know, how he places his hands when we get the snap, the timing of the cadence, the way the ball hits his hand. There's all those things that we try to keep as consistent as possible, but at the end of the day, they're a little different. So having a little chemistry between those two guys just makes everything go a little smoother.
What was it like going through it last year when, you know, you start the season kind of, and he's week to week, and then week to week, and then all of a sudden he's just out? I mean, was there a point when you thought you might get him back?
I wasn't really worried about getting them back. Like, with all of our guys, like those guys are my sons. So, like, I just want to make sure they're good. I want to make sure they're healthy. I want to make sure that they're in the right space, mentally, emotionally, physically. So, like, that's always, whenever someone gets a little ding, whatever the injury is, like, we want to make sure that they're ready to come back. So that was the big thing, was just like seeing him day to day and just making sure that he was like ready to go when he was ready.
Gotcha. the most impressive thing you've seen from Cade Beresford in the last 6 months is what?
Probably his preparation. And that, I think I say that a lot, but I mean, he's in here watching film. He was taking OJ because he's played, Oregon State before. So he's in there watching film, and they're talking about pass rush moves. And so he just is a guy that knows how to prepare. And again, when you're a young guy, you think you do. You're studying more than you did in high school, but you don't really know until you've been in the thick of it. And that's where Cade's made a lot of growth. He wasn't always that way. Like, he had to grow into that role. So he's trying to help grow the younger guys a little bit quicker than his growth process.
On paper, is he behind OJ? If something happened to OJ, would he move over there?
We'd have to, I'm just going to walk out of the room right now when you answer that question. So we'd have to shuffle some things around, and we're fluid. And again, our philosophy is always let's get the 5 best on the field. So if we have to bump a guard out or bring someone else in, it's not going to go automatically to on the paper, the backup. I mean, we're just going to try to find the guys. And maybe that sometimes is the guy on paper who's the second string guy, but as an offense line, you have to have your 5 best guys on the field, regardless of what position they're playing.
Are you still focusing on, one of the coaches I think brought it up earlier in camp, kind of 8 main guys on the offensive line is the core rotation?
Yes.
With Farrar and Randolph and Holiday, I believe, were the other 3, and then the 5. Is that still kind of the main rotation you're looking
at? Yeah, and you guys, everyone saw it last year, you have to have 8 guys that are game ready, and hopefully we can put more guys in games and get them experience and grow them and get them some live reps. But we have to have 8 guys that can start and win a game for us at all different positions. And Dallas has played a bunch of different positions, and Will's played a bunch of different positions, and Mason's a young guy, so he's kind of sticking to a guard position. But we have to find those guys. And the guys right now, we saw last year, the guys that start this game may not start the next game. So we're always trying to keep the competitiveness up and keep those guys preparing. Because if you think about it, we just went through fall camp. This season's way more longer than fall camp. So these guys should continue to get better just like we did during fall camp.
Well, I mean, I know you said things can change, but at least during camp to have 5 guys in 5 spots, and you had so much rotation last year and trying to fill in at center, which moves somebody to another spot. I mean, what does it do when guys can, at least for the time being, have their spot and know who's next to them and just the continuity? How big is that?
It's big, and again, the communication is, I always laugh because we talk in the meeting hey, this is this call, and then when you're out in practice, when you actually hear the guys making the call, they got a mouthpiece in, and it's loud, so you're not really hearing the same call. So it's kind of just feeling and being hey, we are seeing it, and we're going to make this call, but we don't necessarily need to hear each other make it. We just kind of know this is what we're doing, this is who we're working to. So that's a huge deal. We try to teach it conceptually so guys can bounce from different positions and not miss a beat.
I know I'm sure you go in every year thinking your group's going to be great and you feel good about it, but I mean, just with everything you went through last year and you look at what Cade's solidifying and with KHG, I mean, do you feel really good that this group's pretty solid going into the year?
Yeah, and I feel that way every year. So again, that's if I didn't feel that'd be really tough to show up to work every day. So every day we're trying to push those guys and get them 1% better. And then again, hopefully those 1% in January and February, those all stack to where we get to right now to this moment. And like I said, we're going to get a lot more reps during the fall. So we continue, even though we're kind of preparing and guys have specific roles, continue to develop guys and get them ready, because as awesome as it is to have 5 guys this year, what's going to happen? Next year, some guys are going to graduate and we're going to have to fill those spots. So we can't have a drop-off. We're always got to be developing the room and bringing up the young guys.
Where do you think you guys are going to be better this year in the line?
Again, it's the great thing about being an offensive lineman is it's the unit. So you can have an all-American left tackle, one of the best guys in the country, but if the other 4 guys aren't very good, we don't have a good offensive line. And that doesn't really matter. It's different than a receiver. If you have a dynamite receiver, you can throw him a ton of balls and he can make a lot of catches and a high play. So we have to be better as a unit. We want to have a bunch of guys that are good as a unit that don't really stand out. They're just a good 5 guys playing as one.
How are you guys on the injury front? I know, some guys can get banged up in camp.
That's what it's camp is. We went through camp, so no one feels good. Okay. Everyone's a little sore. Everyone's got taped in their fingers, and everyone's elbows sore, and everyone's knees sore, and everyone's ankles sore. So no one's gonna feel great until in January, in February. Everyone's gonna be a little ding, a little bang, and that's part of the position. It's so physical. The demand on those guys is so high that they just get sore, and they have to kind of learn to manage those kind of bumps and bruises.
In terms of pass blocking versus run blocking, where do you feel is there one that's you think you're more happy with right now than the other, or how do you look at those 2 areas?
Yeah, so like when we talk about offensive line, like we want our mentality to lead the way. So we want to, like, when people put on the film, they're like, man, these guys are playing with a certain mentality. Whether it's run or pass, they're like, those guys are physical. They're coming off the ball. They're working as a unit. So we don't necessarily get caught up in, like, you know, our run techniques versus our pass techniques. It's like, can anyone in the stands, can my son be like, hey, Dad, I saw you guys were playing physical today, whether it's run or pass. You guys are playing with that mentality. So that's always the biggest thing for us that we look at is, like, are our guys possessing and playing with that mentality that's required.
How physical was fall camp this year? Was it the same as usual? Did you back off a little bit? Did you push it a little bit?
If anyone was at fall camp, you could tell how physical it was just by the sounds. I mean, we were out there some days, and it was loud. I mean,
Were you trying to push it harder?
it was just kind of worked out. Our guys, right, they want that. So it's that iron sharpen iron. So, again, I think that's a sign of a good program is we don't have to push them and make them do things. Like, that's just what they're used to. They're used to coming off the ball and being physical on both sides. And we have a really, really good defensive front. Like, they're a really physical group. So if on the offensive line, like, if we're not showing up every day, it's not gonna go really well. So we have to kind of bring our A game every single day and set iron sharpen iron. So it was a really, really physical camp, and we didn't have to control it. It was the players kind of leading it.
We've heard how unique George Holani is. What makes it unique to block for him?
He makes our guys look good. That's awesome. I mean, it could be not blocked perfectly, and he's going to find this much daylight and get a nice run. You know what I mean? So that's the beauty is because if it's blocked perfectly, like, you know, I can run through the hole and make a 4-yard gain and be fine. So lots of times he's just the eraser. Like, I mean, someone misses a block and he gives a little jump cut and makes someone miss. And so he's super impressive that way. And just how hungry he is at practice. Like, he wants to go every single rep, and he's sneaking in and taking reps when he's not supposed to. I mean, he's super hungry and super competitive, and that feeds off the guys. Like, if I'm blocking a 3 technique and I feel the tailback come in there and smash into the pile, like, that's going to get me juiced. Like, that's going to get me excited. Like, yeah, this guy's running hard. Like, let's make sure we're coming off because he's running extremely hard. So he kind of is like a little fire starter and kind of a night still line.
You've known, you know, Coach Plow for a long time. What's your guys' dynamic on game day, and how do you communicate, and how have you kind of adjusted your communication over the years?
Yeah, so there's always, again, it's like a football team. Me and Coach Powell have known each other for a long time. We've worked on different staffs with different dynamics, and people have different roles. So it's always about, on game day, efficiency and communication. It's not about yelling and screaming and saying the same thing over and over again. So it's all about efficiency. And he can, you know, if there's a pressure and the right tackle misses the block, he can look at me and I'm like, yeah, I got it. Like, there doesn't need to be, like, I'll go get it fixed. You know, it doesn't need to be a long discussion. Hey, what happened? And I'm not trying to cover myself and be like, oh, the quarterback hang on the ball. It's just know, like, yep, I'll get it fixed, and we can kind of move on to the next thing that we need to solve on game day.
Do you know if it's been decided that if he's going to be on the sideline this year?
I do not know. Mm-mm.
Are you in the booth?
We're still trying to figure out the different configurations of who's upstairs, who's in the booth. And again, we got a bunch of new coaches, so we're trying to figure out through fall camp. We've had the headsets on a lot, working on communication, seeing whose strengths. And again, it's just a different perspective seeing it up there. So we've kind of toyed around with a couple different coaches up in the box.